Welcome to the final public event of the USAID Financial Sector Transformation Project. We are very pleased to have on the podium the United States Agency for International Mission Director and the leaders of our primary government counterparts for the welcoming remarks. Svetlana Rek-Root, Managing Director of the Deposit Guarantee Fund and one of our main beneficiaries, will join us online. On a personal note, I'm glad to see here in person so many of the individuals who have contributed to our project over the last 5 years. I was telling Colleen Green, who's from headquarters, that it's very pleasant to actually see that people have legs and they don't exist in little small square boxes. So we're happy to be back to a live event. Our first speaker is the Mission Director, Mr. James Hope. James arrived here in Ukraine in the summer of 2020, and in fact, this is the first time he and I have met. So welcome to Jim. USAID has a very large and ambitious program here in Ukraine. In the economic sector alone, there are multi-million-dollar projects in agriculture, energy, competitiveness, privatization, credit unions, economic recovery in the East, and cybersecurity. So that does not count the other activities that are in democracy and government and healthcare and et cetera. So, Jim, your welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Bob. Dobro ranku, everyone. Good morning. Governor Shevchenko, great to see you. Our other partners, Chairman Kapinus, Chairman Magomedov, and online Managing Director Rek-Root. Really happy and honored to join all of you today. And it's kind of bittersweet, right? A 5-year project is coming to a close. There's been tremendous success that we're going to talk about over the course of this event. But it is bittersweet because 5 years goes by in a flash, and it's at the same time a celebration today of great work and great partnership with everyone in this room. And as Bob noted, it's great to meet in person. It's been an awfully challenging 18 months around the world, as we all know. But it's good to not have those boxes on the screen, at least for a short time this morning. So, I have a few remarks just for a few minutes, and then we'll get into the rest of the event. So first of all, I want to say that the USAID Financial Sector Transformation activity really comes on the shoulders and really builds on a legacy, a very long legacy of U.S. government support for the financial sector here in Ukraine. In fact, going all the way back to the early days of independence. And I think we should all be proud of that long-standing and very close partnership. And in fact, one of USAID's first activities here in Ukraine, back when we were just opening our doors, was working with the National Bank of Ukraine on bank supervision. This was followed by support for capital markets, including regulation, financial disclosure, corporate governance. More recently, we've been focused on increasing access to finance for businesses to help grow the economy, create jobs. And we've also been working on empowering people, citizens, to use in a more informed way the financial tools and resources that are out there on the market. So all in all, it has been a long-standing, almost 30 years or now plus 30 years of partnership in this critical area. But why, right? Why is this important? Well, 2 reasons. One is people. We know that reliable financial services, reliable and trustworthy financial products ultimately help Ukrainians live better lives. And with those tools, families have greater financial freedom. They have better access to loans to meet their needs at affordable rates. They can safeguard their health with reliable insurance products, and they can plan ahead for their financial future with private pension funds. Now, so people, that's the first reason. Second reason is the economy. Finance, I think many would say, is like the oil in the engine that drives the economy. And finance enables businesses to expand, to create new jobs, invest in the workforce. It empowers entrepreneurs and fuels innovation to create new markets, new opportunities for business concepts, for Ukraine to really engage not only in its domestic market, but regionally and on a global scale. And we see this all the time. The agricultural sector, in the growing technology and IT sector, this is finance at work. And so that brings us to why are we here today? And as the financial sector transformation activity comes to a close, I'm really happy, I'm thrilled to see how applying these principles of people and the economy have worked. They've enabled the project to achieve tremendous results for the people of Ukraine. So in the past 5 years, FST and the team has supported the enactment of 12 major laws. I want to highlight one of them, the very important split law for regulation of the non-bank sector, but also consumer protection legislation, the new law for capital and commodity markets also stand out. So all of these laws together are all aimed to improve the financial system for Ukrainian business owners and individual users. But we all know that passing laws is just one step in the journey. And so implementation of those laws and continuing to make progress and move beyond a bank-dominated financial system still awaits us, all of us working together. Capital and commodity markets development is needed for greater market transparency, cheaper capital, new risk management tools, and more incentives for foreign investors. So that's why, for example, this summer, USAID signed a memorandum of understanding with the government of Ukraine, with the EBRD and the American Chamber of Commerce to launch what's called Next UA, an integrated multi-asset commodity and capital markets center. Next UA, this project, will facilitate the integration of Ukraine's markets into the international ecosystem, particularly for energy and agriculture, but others as well. Next UA is really going to build and carry on from what FST has accomplished and add to their achievements and be part of this long legacy. So with that message of continued work, we are going to stay engaged. USAID is going to be engaged in financial sector reform, financial sector improvement for the years to come. But today, I really want to just thank the people on the team, the FST team, Bob, Yulia, the whole team, Colleen, and the whole DAI team back as well. This is a tremendously successful project. Let's celebrate that today, and I'm glad to be part of that celebration. Ukraine is in a better place because of your work, and none of that happens without great partnership. And so I really want to thank our Ukrainian partners across the financial sector for all of your close collaboration with us. We really thank you for that. So there's a lot to do ahead of us. There's a lot to get through today and in the days, months, and years beyond. Look forward to being part of that effort. And thank you very much. USAID is very proud of this project and all of you. Thank you. Дякую.
Thank you, Jim. We appreciate the warm remarks. Kyrylo Shevchenko has been the governor of the National Bank of Ukraine since the summer of 2020. The NBU plays a major role in the financial system of Ukraine, not just because of the banks, but it also regulates non-bank financial institutions as well. Before heading the NBU, Governor Shevchenko was the chairman of the board of Ukrgas Bank since 2015. FST has collaborated on so many initiatives with the NBU over the past 5 years, from consumer protection to NBFI regulation, to payments and messaging systems, to financial education. I used to joke that it was an odd week when I wasn't at the National Bank of Ukraine at one point. So, Governor Shevchenko.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, it was a good joke, but to be honest, it wasn't joke. Колеги, друзі, всі присутні.
All right, dear colleagues and friends, everybody, hello and welcome. I'd like to say that I appreciate you all. It's been a tremendous development for Ukraine. And all participants who contributed to the successful implementation of the FST project are to be commended for that. I also appreciate our long-standing partners representing the USAID in particular. You have spent more than 30 years operating in this neck of the woods, and it's been 30 years that you have helped us in promoting important reforms for this country. I'm happy to see such a good opportunity today to kind of summarize everything, to think of ideas for making things better in future. 5 years in this project allowed us to get many people together, people who had believed in the success of this endeavor and have been able to achieve big results. We have become bigger partners vis-a-vis American partners. I'd like to highlight high level of skill and expertise of FST experts which worked with the NBU, and I would like to say that we appreciate expert teams and individual experts of the project. You all exhibited profound knowledge, experience in implementing particular initiatives. This collaboration has aided the NBU experts in gaining top-level experience, best practices, which we apply in order to further promote reforms in the financial sector. Thanks to the FST in this country, we have seen a rapid development of public financial literacy, protection of rights of users of financial services, digital financial solutions, cash-free economy, and also we have successfully done a split project. Speaking of the key project implemented within this partnership, I'd like to recall the following. We have had consultations while drafting a number of laws and enactments. Research has been conducted into financial awareness of the public, transformation of the Museum of Money of the NBU, 5 annual events, Global Money Week, a number of tours, Economic Express, which took place in the 9 cities of the country, educational videos on national currency, NBU activities, a number of white books addressing different aspects of regulating non-banking financial market. This list goes on. The project involvement is huge and it covered a lot more lines of activity which contributes to better progress in the financial system of the country. I once again would like to say that we appreciate the project team for supporting our endeavors. You would offer assistance timely and you were expertly doing that. I'm certain that in order to keep this going on that successfully with the USAID, whatever new projects are going to emerge in the financial sector, we should keep on treading on the same path. Thank you.
Svetlana Rekrut is joining us by Zoom from Odessa, where she's participating in a conference. Ms. Rekrut has been heading the Deposit Guarantee Fund since July of 2019. FST has supported the DGF primarily in the areas of communication, public outreach, and financial literacy activities. We have been very pleased to work with them cooperatively for almost the entire time we've been here. Svetlana?
Доброго дня, колеги.
Colleagues and participants, hello. I appreciate this opportunity to speak, although physically I'm not in Kiev right now. But I nevertheless would like to say that FST has been extremely important to the fund over the last 5 years. The USA has been with us throughout the hardest times of the crisis, and thanks to you guys, we have been able to overcome the crisis pretty much successfully. The Guarantee Fund was not just a recipient of assistance, it was a reliable project partner over the 5 years, and I appreciate the USAID and what they did, and personally Robert. The mission of the fund is to guarantee deposits and protect the rights of lenders and to increase financial literacy. So naturally, our key collaboration was about strengthening public trust in financial sector. In particular, we sought to increase financial literacy and protection of the rights of users. This support was extremely important in 2016 and 17 when we could see many insolvent banks leaving the market, but there was a good job done by the fund and the government, which allowed to reduce the social tension and preserve public trust to banks. Together with the project, we created a series of videos addressing how the guarantee system works and how can we protect the rights of users. It also addressed the need to look into the bank contracts and agreements, and these videos have been replicated throughout the websites of participating banks. They were shown in financial literacy training sessions in rural areas for the rural youth. We did that, and that was supported by the project too. Thanks to the project, we began regular opinion polls in order to see people's awareness about the guarantee system, and most importantly, it allows us to get an idea of the needs among these people, what kind of knowledge they need, and what can we do about that. Tomorrow, or one of these days, the Supreme Council is going to address the draft law on increasing the guarantee up to 400 hryvnia and then 1600 hryvnia, which will start in 2023. The Guarantee Fund, jointly with the NBU, began drafting a law to extend guarantees to cover clients of non-banking financial institutions like credit unions and life insurance companies. Those are tremendous changes in the deposit guarantee system. It will enhance protection of users of financial services. It is also important right now because financial services are becoming increasingly affordable because of growing digitalization, and that's why users have to be increasingly aware of their rights because there might be certain risks in the making. The fund realizes how high is the price of illiteracy in this field. So we have to keep working together in this field in order to keep improving financial literacy and awareness of the public, and we're ready to take part in the new USAID-led projects in the financial domain. Thank you once again, folks, from the fund. We appreciate this USAID project. It has been with us over the last 5 years. It has helped us through the hardest times of the financial sector, in particular in 2014 and 17. Thank you.
Evgeny Kapanus has been the chairman of the Pension Fund of Ukraine since October 2018. Previously, he worked in the Ministry of Finance as Deputy Minister, Chief of Staff, and State Secretary. FST has collaborated with the Pension Fund on IT systems, procurement, and the promotion of e-services for workers and retirees. Evgen?
Thank you very much.
Colleagues, it is an important day, a red letter day to me, because it allows us to summarize the products of a tremendous work that has been conducted by the project over the last 5 years. And I'd like to say that Pension Fund may be one of those institutions that has gained a great deal of assistance and support, and in today's realities, it has completely changes ways in which the pension fund is offering services to retirees. I remember an active cooperation began with the project. The pension fund received one of the most powerful server facilities, and right now it is enough to cover the operations of the entire system of the fund. It increases the quality of service, it stores data and processes data efficiently enough. So all of the data produced by the fund get processed. This allowed us to see new ways in offering services. Most of the services of the fund are done electronically. Anybody today might get their pensions without actually having to go to the fund physically. They no longer should go to the fund and yet get records from the register, get the updates on their service record and whatever. That's the product of the collaboration we have had. If these services get popularized further, we're gonna have a better success. We work with the project, and it allows us to bring this information across to the citizens. We did press tours across some cities and towns in this country where we would tell people about that, letting them know how to use these services without having to physically go to a particular office of the fund. The videos that have been produced are a part of the public announcement, and they have also contributed tremendously to popularizing these services. It allowed us to get people to get the message. They understood the importance of social insurance and other things that are important to do in today's realities. Further progress and development of the pension fund is impossible without branding of the fund. So with the help of the project, we received a particular style of brand of the fund, which allowed us to reformat all of our units and offices under the same format. We're having a single communication pattern, and that's the key message about what the pension fund is like today. I appreciate the project, in particular Robert, for all of this support and work that has been done lately. I appreciate the entire project team. We enjoyed high quality assistance throughout the entire work, and thank you so much for being a reliable partner to us. And we could always see that all of the projects that are emerging would be executed within the time allotted for that, and there would not be schedule slippage. Thank you.
Our last speaker for offering welcoming remarks is Ruslan Makhmedov, who is the chairman of the National Securities and Stock Market Commission. He took up his duties in February of 2021, and he's also one of those who I've not met in person, but I'm more than happy to welcome him here today. The FST project has worked probably more closely with the Securities Commission than anyone else, except perhaps the National Bank of Ukraine. We've worked with them on financial disclosure, on legal and regulatory reform, on commodity markets development, on market infrastructure, IT systems, and public relations generally. So, Ruslan?
Bob, thank you very much. Я дуже радий.
I'm very happy to be a part of this event today because it's a good summary, a good upshot of this important stage we have completed in the history of the country. Over these 5 years, we had been collaborating with the FST, and the Commission in particular has been able to gain a lot of assistance. And I can't find the best word to express that right now, but it's been a comprehensive assistance that we got from the USAID-led project, and I think we have done the largest number of projects with the USAID. I took charge of the Commission back in February of this year, but I've been in this market for a long time, more than 15 years, and I'd like to say that the first exchange, the first depository of securities in this country appeared thanks to the USAID. And because of the FST, we have been able to implement projects on building financial disclosure system, then with the commodity market development endeavors. And now Next2A is the next project which has been supported at the highest level, at the top level. And even the Prime Minister took charge of this project. So I'm hopeful that all of the achievements we have had so far, thanks to the FST, will be a good foundation allowing us to keep on building a transparent financial and commodity market in this country, making it one of the financial hubs, centers of Eastern Europe. We've got what it takes to do it. We've got the makings of that. We have a well-developed economy. What was missing was infrastructure. So a great contribution to this endeavor came from FST, so I appreciate the entire FST team, Robert Bond, USAID. Thanks for being with us over these 5 years, supporting us in every way, and hopefully this fruitful collaboration will continue, and we will be proud of being a part of all of these achievements, and all of our partners will be able to appreciate the benefits from what has been done. Thank you very much for that once again, Robert.
I arrived in Ukraine November 12th, 2016, to start up a $26 million USAID technical assistance project. One of the major objectives of the new project was to rebuild and restore confidence in the banking system. 1 month later, on December 18th, the government nationalized the country's largest bank and announced it was because there was a $5 billion hole in the bank's balance sheet. Not exactly a great beginning for our project, but we persevered. There is supposedly a Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. The FST project has certainly lived in interesting times. In the last 5 years, Ukraine has witnessed 2 presidential administrations, continuous Russian aggression, the COVID-19 pandemic, the closure of 100 banks, attacks on anti-corruption institutions, entanglement in U.S. politics, seemingly nonstop negotiations with the International Monetary Fund, and many, many more that I could name. So it has certainly been interesting the last 5 years. Today I want to talk about some of the things that we have achieved over the last 5 years through and with our counterparts and partners. I will not mention all of the FST activities, but we'll try to highlight the most important. For example, I will touch only very lightly on our activities in fintech or in financial disclosure and our work with NGOs, because those will be the subject of some of the discussion in the panels that follow. I will also share some conclusions about financial sector reform in Ukraine. The FST project was initially designed in 2015 on the assumption that several laws would be in place before the project began. Specifically, the split law reorganizing how NBFIs would be regulated, consumer lending and consumer protection laws would be in place, and laws to support capital and commodity development as well. In fact, none of that was ready when we arrived. These are the goals and objectives of the FST project. At first glance, it seems like an overly broad and ambitious project with too many components. That was certainly my perception at the time. But one of the advantages of this approach is that it allowed us flexibility to move among many activities and objectives as opportunities arose. We could make progress in one area while preparing and waiting for opportunities in others. Ukraine is a difficult environment for reform, and the timing and sequencing of reform activities is hard to predict. Thus, flexibility in project design and execution is essential. We began our work in pension reform. A crisis was looming, and there was an opportunity for change. FST supported the adoption of the pension reform law in 2017 that increased the payout to retirees while also introducing changes to stabilize the pension system. In 2017-2018, as Mr. Kapanus remarked, FST procured and transferred to the Pension Fund of Ukraine an Oracle server that allowed the centralization of pension records. It had enough capacity that the PFU could use the servers to expand e-services to workers and retirees using this enhanced capacity. And FST supported that rollout of services to Ukrainian citizens. Similarly, FST focused on capacity building activities with the Securities Commission because a lot of the laws that we needed were not in place. This included activities such as training, conferences, support for IT systems. FST also supported financial disclosure by developing appropriate software for the reporting system, for the creation of financial statements in IXBRL, IFRS format, and trainings on the software. Meanwhile, we forged alliances and advocated for new financial sector laws. We also began the preparatory work for changes in the non-bank regulatory framework 2 years before the split law was passed in September 2019. The FST project is known for its support for legal and regulatory reform of financial markets in Ukraine. We are but one among many voices advocating reform, but we have provided resources, key expertise, and legal advice to advance the agenda. The reason we focused on changes to the law is that there is a very strong tendency here in Ukraine for entrepreneurs and financial actors to believe that unless something is explicitly allowed in the law, then it is prohibited. To achieve innovation in finance, the law needs to support a certain boldness and experimentation based on international standards. Thus, we worked at improving laws, changing mindsets, and trying to facilitate new behavior. With the exception of 2 major financial laws, I believe the legal and regulatory framework is now adequate to spark a boom in financial services. For the last 2 years, FST has emphasized implementation of the law. This includes working with the NBU on NBFI regulation and reporting and monitoring under the split law, and on new regulations and reporting for consumer protection. We are still, even with just 3 weeks left in the project, actively engaged with the Securities Commission on regulations for the laws on organized capital and commodity markets. That work has proceeded very quickly. The Commission has been very strong at passing draft regulations and posting them for comment, and we hope that by the time we leave, most of that work will be done. We are also reaching out to the private sector to encourage it to take a more assertive posture toward new opportunities. And last week we announced with our partners the creation of a Ukrainian ISDA master agreement for derivatives trading. We hope that will be a major financial instrument to jumpstart the derivatives markets here. So we think the financial sector is posed for a new era with new financial products for the benefit of businesses and consumers, but we think the key is continued implementation in discussion with the market. Ukraine badly needs to develop its commodity and capital markets. Indeed, by Western standards, they are almost non-existent. This development would bring to the market transparency, liquidity, foreign investment, risk management practices for businesses, and new savings opportunities for Ukrainians. This is the challenge. We have, for the last year and a half, we've been working to develop the next UA concept under a memorandum of understanding. We are in the last stages of completing the feasibility assessment for this activity, and we hope that will be discussed with the market soon. SMEs need capital to grow. FST supported SME finance primarily through leasing. We chose leasing because it is a financial instrument widely and successfully used in the West, because Ukrainian leasing companies were willing to collaborate amongst themselves and with us, and because there was an association offering business services to members that we could work with. I think leasing will continue to grow exponentially, especially as support continues for the Ukrainian Union of Lessors, and if international financial institutions start to make guarantees and credit available to leasing companies. I think factoring, which we've just started working on, has similar features to leasing and could provide a breakthrough in access to finance over the next 5 years. As Jim Hope noted, USAID's objective in the financial sector reform are support for economic growth and financial empowerment of ordinary Ukrainians. I believe that financial sector reform is in fact a prior to and a necessary requirement for economic growth. I think there are a number of studies that simply show financial development comes before economic growth comes. Nevertheless, I recognize with him that reforms must be accompanied by changes to the culture and practices of finance as they impact everyday citizens. You cannot get financial sector stability unless you have an educated populace using financial services. FST has actively supported financial inclusion. This includes personal finance course with a textbook and a workbook for high school students, support for numerous NBU and DGF activities to educate citizens, specialized initiatives for vulnerable groups, the elderly and the young, and support for NGOs to carry out financial literacy activities. I am pleased to announce that the U.S. Peace Corps will be using our FST materials in its new program of financial learning for youth. We have been active in promoting financial consumer protection. It is one thing to pass laws providing protection and quite another to enforce compliance with them. FST introduced mystery shopping to Ukraine to monitor the lending practices of banks and finance companies, and then we made this information publicly available. So for the first time, everybody knew exactly how much banks and finance companies were charging on real annual interest rates and what their practices were with regard to contracts and advertising. Ukraine's record in consumer protection has improved in the past 5 years, but improvement needs to come from stronger government enforcement of the law. But this is not exclusively a task for government. Banks and finance companies need to educate their customers, train their staff, and change their contracts to comply with the law. Civil society organizations and nations need to monitor what practices are, focus on complaint resolution, and educate on frauds and schemes. I want to close on a personal note. The first is I would like to thank our counterparts, all of them, international financial institutions, donors, partners, banks, grantees, universities, subcontractors, consultants, and others who have assisted us in the last 5 years. I would like to especially thank EY, which was our major subcontractor here, and provided valuable reports and recommendations. Finally, as several of our speakers alluded to, this was a team effort, and I would like to thank the dedicated FST staff who took the word transformation in our project title seriously. They worked hard, conceived the big ideas, and went for big reforms, and they did not worry unduly too much about any controversy we might provoke with our research and recommendations. I basically said, I have your back. If, as long as you're accurate, we're not worried about controversy. So thank you all for your dedication, and I hope that you will continue reform of the financial sector here in Ukraine. Thank you.
Ну що, будемо продовжувати.
All right, let's carry on.
I assume most of you know Yulia Vitka. Yulia was the deputy of this project from its inception. She is an excellent financial markets lawyer. She's a strong manager. She is a gifted public speaker. And most importantly, she is a good friend. So Yulia is going to talk about the latest results we have from our financial literacy survey that we did with the National Bank of Ukraine in late August. Yulia?
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate all the words that you said, and especially about friendship. Добрий день всім, дорогі колеги.
Hello, everybody, my dear colleagues from the project and all of the partners and counterparts, everybody who has been with us, discussing things, making us figuring out what should be the best way of doing things. Robert told us about the work that was done in order to get certain laws passed. I will be focused on changes in the financial culture. Passing a law is not a big deal. I mean, there's a certain way of getting it done. But changing financial culture is a totally different story. This time we might be slightly sad, but still there are things we can take pride in. We have seen an improvement in the financial culture of the local public. So in this country, doing something like that within a short time is a big deal, and that's quite a tremendous progress, I should say. When we did a kick-off meeting of the project, we looked at the consumers of financial services in this country. Back in the day, they were unaware pretty much about financial issues. They were conservative about what could they do with the money. They would prefer keeping the money in cash, and they would keep it in hard currency, foreign currency. They would not trust financial institutions so much. They would not take loans for the most part. But 70% or so said they were still happy with where they were at. Life goes on, they would say, and they were kind of viable enough and could resist financial stress. But that was the situation 5 years ago. 3 years ago, we tried to use the OECD methodology and we implemented a survey as a way of comparing how Ukraine fares compared to other OECD countries, and also we could do a multi-component analysis in order to figure out the financial literacy index. So 2018, 3 years ago, you can see here the rankings among the countries in terms of financial literacy. The maximum score is 20, the average is 13.3. Look at the neighboring countries. Ukraine was bringing up the rear in these rankings, and we tried to see why. So over all these years, we could see that it's not just a number, it's not something made up, it's just a real life story.
Не знаю, маленька Грузія або інші країни там колишнього Радянського Союзу мають більш високі позиції, ніж Україна. Я чому ставлю таке запитання? Тому що, відповідно, чим нижчі рейтинги в ваших опитуваннях, тим більше буде людей, на яких ще країна живається.
Власне, всі ці 5 років ми проводили багато роботи.
So over the last 5 years, a lot of work has been accomplished, and
Цього року ми заново заміряли.
earlier this year, we remeasured the financial literacy index in this country, and let's look at the findings. We're no longer in the bottom. We have seen quite an increase in this literacy. Now it's 12.3 compared to 11.6 back in 2018. That's what has happened over 3 years. Well, there are certain reasons why it happened like that. But over the last couple of years, things were going hard. I would say it's been a good progress compared to other OECD country. Let's look further into the index. So over 3 years, we have seen an increase like this. Maximum is 21, but none of the countries has reached it. 16 seems to be the highest score. So we have seen 6% increase in 3 years, and that's great. Financial literacy index in most of the other countries remained the same over this time. Only some countries have seen a growth by 2.4%. So effectively, we have seen the largest growth in financial literacy index. Let me remind you of what is financial literacy. It's not just the knowledge or the ability to calculate an interest rate or something like that. It's a multi-factor kind of indicator which entails the knowledge, behavior, and attitude. So in this country, there has been an increase across all of the components of the index. So let's get more detail on there to see how we look like compared to the OECD. The orange color indicates the pace of growth in Ukraine. So you see knowledge. We had the highest pace compared to other low-income countries and middle-income countries. So orange color indicates Ukraine here. So in terms of knowledge, there's a good increase. In terms of behavior, it's not so much of a growth as we saw elsewhere, but compared to some of the OECD countries, we're doing good. Attitude, we're doing good and very good in this. Some countries are in the minus there. And it's been like an overall growth of 6% in terms of financial literacy index. So positive changes have happened a lot more quickly in this country than across other OECD countries. Speaking of demographic peculiarities, the gap between men and women is not so significant. And it's still like that, like it was 3 years ago. So women and men are equally literate, which is not the case in many other countries where women are typically less financially literate. Just like last time, the lowest score was found among very young people up to 24 years of age. And it was also pretty poor among the elderly, 60 plus. It was a slight improvement, but a very negligible one. There is still a growing index depending on the size of income and background. The higher the income and the better the education, the higher index of financial literacy you can see. We also looked into savings, and the trend suggests that if someone has more savings, then typically that guy has a better financial literacy index. We can see a growth in the gap of financial literacy between cities and villages, which was not the case before. There was a gap, but not so big. This time it got bigger, and we can see where we should do our work. There is also quite a gap between users and non-users of technologies. So digitalization promotes financial inclusion. Those that are IT literate and use mobile apps typically show better financial literacy. Just some more detail on the components of the index. So knowledge. Almost half the population rightly answered 5 out of 7 questions. And that's the target indicator under the OECD methodology. So it's a good indicator. It's 7.5% growth compared to what it was before across OECD countries. Users and non-users of financial services, there is a difference between them. The orange color indicates users, the blue color indicates non-users. So clearly, the greater experience you have as a user, the more financial literacy you exhibit, and we can see it throughout the section on knowledge based on respondents' answers. Financial behavior. We looked into that. So we tried to see if people are doing savings, are they doing budgeting, are they keeping their spendings under control. There were inquiries about financial discipline. We have seen quite an improvement in this component of the index over the last 3 countries, making top 10 countries in this section. The citizens have shown quite a good financial discipline. 80% of them pay their bills on time. People began to do savings more actively, but still they prefer hard currency, and these savings are short-term as a rule. People made more deposits, and that's what we can see from the NBU statistics. There has been slight diversification through the investments like internal bonds, foreign securities, but that's not a big deal right now. People started tallying up their expenses and they started doing budgeting because of the external developments and circumstances, maybe the guard. But planning for the long term, that's where we're not doing good, especially if we go below middle income bracket of population. Well, if people are pretty poor, then they live with what they have today and they're not thinking of plans for the distant future. Thinking of the attitude to financial matters, we have seen a growth in this regard, although it's not very big at all. It's merely 17% of adults that have been able to reach the target. But still, it is an improvement, because in many other countries, in this regard, there has been a deterioration. So why the score is not so high here? Well, short-term planning, that's the first reason, and still, people still tend to believe that they should better spend the money instead of saving it. We also compared the attitude of Ukrainians to the government and to their peers. So, in this country, people typically say that they can keep fooling the government. I mean, if it comes to taxes or informal pay. The orange color indicates those who are ready not to pay taxes if it's going to be possible. It's 45%. And pretty much the same people would like to get their pay informally. But still, they would not fool a sales clerk in the store. They would not do that. So they can fool the government, but they would not fool their peers, somebody who's pretty much like themselves. So that's an interesting trend. 50% of the people use a mobile phone or a mobile app in making payments, and there has been quite a growth in that. And this number goes beyond the number of those who only use the computer. There was an increase in the financial literacy. Last time we have seen that people would like to learn more about that. They want to get more savvy about financial literacy. They want their kids to be taught that in high school, and we have seen a further increase in this by 18%. But there is one more thing here. 23% of people believe in the fairness of financial institutions. That's not too many. Like 1 out of 5 doesn't trust it, and 60 plus, most of these people tend to believe those institutions. And let's watch the video, like the classic example of what makes people distrust financial institutions.
Ну, це такий короткий
That's just a short, kind of funny story. But effectively, it's not just our problem. It's also portrayed in classic movies. Now, back to the use of financial products.
Топ-5 фінансових
Top 5 financial products in terms of awareness. Credit card, collateral, current account card, and mortgage. We also measured the products people do not typically know so much about, but they have learned more about over the last 3 years. And there's going to be other products featured on the list. So current account, that's the same as before, but crypto assets, microfinancial loan, and mobile banking, well, these are the 3 products people learned more about, although it is still not in the top 5 financial products. Now, let's look at this next thing. Awareness of financial products in this country. It's pretty good in this country, 79%. And it is close to the average for the OECD in that sample. But this awareness somehow does not lead to wider use of financial services. Let's look at the key products here, which were analyzed under the OECD methodology: payment products, insurance, loans, savings, investments. So we can see how those are used, and that speaks about the financial inclusion. So the usage of that has gone up from 29 to 53 in payment, and it somehow can be comparable to the things that are up there across the OECD countries. But all the rest of the items indicating other products like savings, lending, insurance, those are just like short lines compared to what you get in the OECD countries. The use of financial services remains not very high, 57%. That's those who would buy the products over the last couple of years, and it's been slightly lower than in 2018. So people learn more about that, but still they do not go for it, and we have to think it over. There's a big potential for growth there. I haven't spoken of the methodology so much yet. This survey was not done haphazardly. We did individual interviews with respondents, 40 minutes each, so it's been quite a long talk. And we sought to figure out how much people know about this thing, financial math plus behavior aspects. So this is a representative reflection of where it's at with this right now. Pension plans. That's an interesting thing. What is good is that you get 71% of Ukrainians that expect a pension from the government. 33% say they will continue working. It all depends on the level of income. The higher the income, the more they count on themselves, their savings, or the ability to work while on retirement. All in all, across the population, more people are more certain about the future pension. From 12, it has gone up to 19% over the last 3 years. Financial viability. There have been lots of indicators about that, and we chose the best ones, I guess. What is good is that for the 1% of people in this country has a financial buffer, a reserve of a kind, which would see them through a month up to half a year. Compared to OECD countries, it's even better. So people start making savings, and this makes them more resilient to financial stress. Financial well-being index, that's the latest index we measured. All in all, it suggests if people are doing good, living good, and whether their life decisions depend on finance. So in this regard, Ukraine has gone up slightly higher. It's gone one level higher. There has been a slight growth, not as much as we wanted to see. This financial well-being index is 42% of the maximum possible. So Ukrainians, in spite of all of the positive developments like growing knowledge and attitude, they still say that they're uncertain about making decisions in life in terms of finance. They cannot do long-term planning. As we looked at the decision tree, we could see that the key factor behind it would be the size of income. And wrapping up this part, I'd like to say that in our events, bankers would keep on telling, our best client is the client that is educated, aware. So that dream has almost come true. You've got good, finance-savvy clients, and we have nurtured them over the last 5 years. There is a good pace in growing financial literacy. There are certain factors like low income and external factors which still keep people from making long-term plans. What is good is that Ukrainians are making savings more actively. They make a financial reserve and gain resistance to stress, financial stress. Digital trend will be going on, and this will lead to better financial inclusion and more usage of financial services. There is quite a potential for proposing new financial services. There are clients out there which can afford it. They keep their savings mostly in hard currency, but they would want to diversify their savings in a way. So that's another good outlook for new banking products and capital market products. And hopefully you and us will be working on that further on. But there is a legislative environment in place that Robert told us about. There are customers that are ready to go ahead and use financial services. They just need to be certain about that. So I think it's pretty much a good outlook for continued collaboration in the future. Thank you. with this, I would like the panelists to join the panel.
Серед учасників в нас сьогодні є наші
We're happy to welcome some of our partners and grantees. Yulia Lamzhets, representing the Association of Legal Clinics. We're happy to have found such partners for the project. Rostislav Duke, he chairs the Association of FinTech. Kristina Kovtun, she runs a legal clinic of the Ukrainian Catholic University. I still remember all of that. We have a chair of the Association of Financial Institutions and Denis Grishenko, deputy chair of the Committee on Legal Policy of the NBU, is the Independent Banking Association of Ukraine. So the partners and grantees who have been able to do a lot of things locally, we could not have done better than them as a project. Alexei Sobel, representing CFA Ukraine, he's also an outstanding partner of ours. So let's discuss the results and see what you think of that, and then everybody will be able to tell us shortly about your success story in your particular area, in your region, and we will also think of your future plans. So I'd like for you guys to tell me about the following. What do you think about the growing index of financial literacy? Is that a product of efforts undertaken by you and us, joint efforts in the financial sector, or is that just a natural pattern or phenomena? Is that a result of growing digitalization? Maybe that's the key reason. Maybe there is something else behind it. Come on. So Rostislav, break the ice. Well, the project has done a fantastic job over the last 5 years. I remember how it was getting started, and the team run by Mr. Bond has exceeded any of the expectations we have had back then. So fantastic job, and now we enjoy fantastic results. I will speak about FinScargo later, but that's also another product of the project. So people are learning, and that's the key thing to me. The second thing is digitalization, and it has made quite a progress because of the pandemic. So people, when they run out of options, they start learning quicker. And there's one more thing. Many parents want their kids to be savvy about finance, and the parents are not so knowledgeable about that. So we need to see what we can do about that. Then comes the second question to you all, actually. Why not so many people are using that? I mean, they learn more about that, but still they do not trust it and they do not go for it. What's missing? Income, motivation, proposal, offers from financial institutions. Well, the key thing in the financial sector is not money, it is trust, confidence, and building confidence will lead to wider usage. All right, thank you. Yulia, hello. Yes, indeed, what is missing is confidence, and when we speak with the clients in legal clinics, what is missing is success story. I mean, there have been many failures that they tell us about, and they hear about that from the media all the time, and that makes them wonder and doubt the capacities of existing systems and institutions. So we need to tell them more about success stories as a way of letting them see that it's not all that bad. The legislation is getting better. You get many more tools that are out there to protect the rights of consumers, and I guess that's where we can work further to turn it around. Okay, Natalia, you're gonna have to work with those who are the least financially literate, the youngsters, but you will later tell us how you're gonna do that. So, in your opinion, what else is missing? I mean, why people still do not trust it so much? Your statistics clearly suggest quite progress made, and that's a fact. What is missing? Well, I think we need to keep working comprehensively, trying to develop soft skills. In the Peace Corps, we call them life skills. That's media literacy, critical thinking, emotional intellect, because many decisions are made based on certain emotions, experiences. So all of us as partners should possibly work along these lines, getting people to develop those skills, and this will contribute to better results and better progress in financial behavior. Okay, thank you. Alex, you work with adults, not the youngsters, and you offered courses to them. You did a lot to help them increase their financial literacy, to let them learn more about investments. Yes, indeed. We also work with youth, and actually, we as a community try to cover youth. Research of the Global Institute shows that if you want to increase the number of women working in the financial sector, then you have to bring them to this profession after the institute. If they choose some other profession, then you wasted your time. So in this country, there is a growing demand for financial services, so people learn more about financial things, and we believe that people make certain savings first, and then they think of what they should do with that, and then they try to learn more about financial services and all that. You were also asking which comes first, an egg or a chicken? Like, should we need to offer the course to the people, or should they have the need for that? It's both. I mean, it takes two of that to be around. We offered certain courses, and people appreciated that, so we also need to see proposals coming from the financial institutions, because there is already a demand for it. And speaking of confidence, the CFE Institute did a survey on trust in financial institutions, and the results show that one negative message ruins confidence. And then you have to make 5 to 7 positive messages in order to rectify the situation. So it is important to keep telling about success stories, like somebody has been able to manage their money very successfully, and that's how confidence can be rebuilt. Okay, Christina represents a showcase legal clinic of the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv City. They have been awarded by the Cabinet of Ministers. They work with vulnerable groups, ex-combatants, and so on. Tell us more about that. Well, I actually believe that digitalization is a factor, and also awareness-raising campaigns that are conducted. All of that leads to those results you have reported earlier today. We can also admit that the pandemic has made many people lose their jobs, and then they try to think of making savings. They would think of budget planning in a different way. So it's a comprehensive thing. So you get so many developments happening, making people think of improving their financial literacy. Speaking of confidence and trust, in my legal clinic we work a lot with youth, letting them know about financial things. And I can tell you what their perceptions are. But also we can see people coming to us, which are typically low-income people and so on, vulnerable groups, and they don't know much about finance. They cannot think of interest rates, they cannot compare them across different banks. If you organize your activities right and let people know about the products that have been developed within the project, like creditometer and things like that, then it's not going to be that much complicated. But some people just do not know the basics. So you have to keep educating them, and it will allow them to see how it happens, and it will make them trust these practices. And success stories have to be reported to them. You can think of restructuring if you're in trouble. If you have 60 microloans, then there's still a way out of that. So my legal clinic addresses those things. Okay, thank you so much. Let's have it from somebody who represents micro-lending organizations. What do you think about these results? For your product, there has been a growing awareness. Maybe not usage, but awareness has become better. Well, I'd like to actually commend Robert Bond, you and the entire team, for what you have been doing in the financial market. Financial literacy and culture were discussed 5 years ago. Actually, 5 years ago, the Ukrainian Association of Financial Companies has been established. Bankers want educated customers, as the entire financial sector. People still remember how they used to use certain financial services. It's like a bad memory. If that is gone, then there's going to be a new culture, new confidence, and new thinking. And this will be an impact on the financial services sector. So we think joint efforts are needed, the efforts of donors, regulator, and financial service providers, as well as consultants and legal clinics. Through joint efforts, you can help restore the confidence, and you will share the same and right messages with the people, and over time that will lead to better results. Denise, you will speak for the banks, I guess. Thank you. Well, once again, I would like to say that I appreciate the project. They have been doing a great thing for this country. And speaking of financial literacy, as a banking community, we have seen significant progress, and the statistics collected corroborates that. And market professionals share that opinion. There are certain difficulties which get in the way of financial literacy. In 2021, it hasn't been quite a success story, but still, there was a way to resolve problems of those who made hard currency loans. Previously, the banks and clients would not hear each other, but in 2021, we have seen that financial literacy has gotten better, and those who have hard currency loans, they think it over more carefully, they check with the banks, and they do not rush into conclusions about taking those kinds of loans. And that's a very telling thing. So financial literacy has to be improved further, but everybody is raised in the family at the end of the day, and I think we need to make sure that folks, parents, be involved in this literacy. So apart from kids and youth, we need to cover parents as well, so that the entire family would be in the know. So in daily life, we need to try and improve the financial literacy of parents, so that when the family gets together, they could teach their kids something, like they would teach their kids to count their own money. thanks to this project, Ukraine has been on the right track. So we're moving on, we improve financial literacy, but over time, I think we're going to be able to see where it's going to be at. It's been too little time that passed. So over time, we're going to see how it's going to go. And sometimes clients would like to get a particular type of loan, never thinking of how they're going to pay it back. So they need the money right there and now. But market professionals are interested in seeing an increase in lending. But I think over time we're going to see how it's going to pan out. So for the time being, we just need to keep moving on within the policy lines that have been presented to us earlier today. You spoke of the need to train parents apart from children, and we're going to discuss that further. So, Natalia, let's bring up your slide. So you're going to tell us how you're going to work with our materials in this financial literacy endeavor. So the project came up with training materials which were okayed by the ministry. There's like a textbook and a workbook. I don't remember how many schools used that, 5,000. That was like a subject they introduced in their curriculum, and they teach senior high school students financial literacy. Since the project is nearing its end, we have transferred the rights to the Peace Corps Ukraine, and they're ready to work with youth. So tell us how you're intending to do it. And by the way, these are the people that are the least financially literate. So tell us about ways of engaging with these people. Do you see any integrated courses? Because the Ministry of Education keeps on speaking about that. It's like financial literacy plus entrepreneurship plus math. So tell us, what's your take on that? Thank you, Yulia. I appreciate the FST project team. On behalf of the Peace Corps and my fellow colleagues and Ukrainian partners and communities that we worked with, we appreciate what your project has done. It's been hard to keep doing this. The Peace Corps volunteers spent 2 years working in communities together with Ukrainian partners. They offer training for youth and educators and others like that. But in 20 and 2021, it didn't happen. And we all know why. It's because of the pandemic. But we still appreciate your project coming over, helping us out, and in partnership we have been able to implement a number of educational projects for Ukrainian partners and communities. So with this project we established a course which is called Me and My Money, and expert support has been offered in conducting training sessions. We were doing this online and through Zoom. We couldn't do this offline, but we nevertheless completed a series of training sessions on financial literacy for educators, youth workers, social workers, my fellow colleagues from the Peace Corps. They keep spreading the knowledge. They become the agents of change, which keep offering these trainings inside their communities, covering youth and young students, sharing their knowledge with them. We also did some training sessions on financial inclusion for parents, and a lot of knowledge was a new thing to parents. Sometimes those were the parents which have handicapped babies, and we know that those families have certain obstacles to education. So those training sessions that we did was a great help to them. Those parents take part in Special Olympic Games, and this is taken care of by some other project in this country. So we really appreciate that. Your project has also been involved in adapting the translation of the textbook from English, and that's going to make it easier for the volunteers to do their job in this country. They would be able to work with other fellow colleagues in doing those lessons. They will be referring to the textbook in English, Ukrainian colleagues will be using the Ukrainian version, and that's gonna deliver a better product. Speaking of success stories, youth are ready to get this knowledge and put it in practice, and thinking of what they could do with it. This is a journalist club in Zolotonosha town. In the Peace Corps, we really take care of the rural communities out there, and we're glad to see that after the training session, the youngsters have decided to do some research, journalist projects, and video interviews on financial literacy. They call their project Financial Literacy Must Have. This has been around for half a year now. We spoke about financial fraud earlier, and one of the communities shared with us a story in which they have been able to avoid financial fraud. Some guys came around to their village in Ternopil region, and people came around as photographers, and they told the senior high school students that we're gonna make the photo album for you, and you bring us the cards, bank cards of your parents. But some of these kids have had the training before, and they told this to the teacher. She checked with the village elder, and then eventually they took care of these fraudsters and made them leave the village. So that was a very telling story. I mean, it suggests that the teams are ready. So initially in those training sessions, many would say that that's too complicated. Financial literacy is way too hard. It should be done later. It's not good for high school. But then we gave it a whirl, and our youth workers and the like, they completed the training session, and there is Natalia Versal, one of the trainers, and eventually they said that this knowledge can be used by all of us, and it can be shared by each and every one of us, and that's how it will be reaching the youth. You say youth seems to have the lowest index in financial literacy. Well, we underestimate youth. On the one hand, we say youth is our future. Like someday they're going to become grown-ups, and they will grow strong, and they need to pick up certain skills. In many training sessions, we would ask the guys, like, when do you think you have to speak with the youth about financial literacy or critical thinking? And there are people who say you should start at the age of 15 or 16. I guess we should not procrastinate with that. Those most important skills and knowledge should be told to kids at a pretty early age, before teenage maybe. In one of the clubs on financial literacy, some of the 15-year-olds would say that their folks actually keep them from opening up children's bank cards. Banks allow for that right now. Folks typically say, if you have some money, you're gonna run away or you're gonna waste it on something. So teenagers run out of options in using the knowledge they gain. So I agree, we need to work with parents more and more. Thank you, Natalia. What is your coverage, and how many people are you planning to cover? Could you give me any ballpark estimates and the geographic coverage data? Are those small communities? Yes, we had small communities, like 15 communities, mostly rural. Zlatonosha, Girske, little village there. We also did virtual classes with ex-volunteers. We did that on financial literacy. There have been communities in Kharkiv region, Kirovograd. So we actually operate in all regions of the country, here and there. And we would invite youth workers and educators from those communities Most of them represented communities of towns or villages. We try to invite experts in methodologies from the neighboring districts because they would be able to share all of these things with the teachers in their districts and neighborhoods. We also checked with the youth project of the Peace Corps, and over the next 5 years at least, we're going to keep working with the communities along these lines. So once the volunteers are back, they're going to use all of the resources from your project in order to have the multiplier effect across the communities. All right, thank you. Over to Alexei now. We appreciate CFA. It is a community of financial analysts which certify this profession in the market. We appreciate your involvement in training Ukrainians in investments. So people wonder how they can invest where. So what are the results of the course that you did? What could be done better? Is this overall course good enough? Is that a one fit for all, or maybe you should have some more targeted programs, tailored programs? Thank you. I appreciate support. We have really done it jointly, and this course has been successful in this country and not just in this country. We have been awarded as the best CFA community in the world. That's an organization that has 140,000 members across all countries. We have been awarded that because we had produced that course. And I'd like to thank the project for that. It's an online course. Courses for financial literacy and investment are too few in this country. As I told you earlier, the demand for that is there, but there is no supply. Anybody could take on this course. We had about 19,000 people who signed up for that. I don't know if that's too much or too little. Well, every year you get 50,000 people getting admitted to economic universities. An online course made 50% of that number, and that's quite a lot. 2,500 have completed the course and got certificates of completion. We also train children with the Research Challenge. It's a special competition for those mostly interested in financial investments, the students, senior students of universities. It's about 500 of them. So 2,500 completed the course, got certificates. And that's a lot if we think of it as an online course. The success rate is quite high. We also got positive feedback for the most part, because people were missing out on that, really. In this particular course, people said that there was too much theory in it, but that was like a basic course which we took from the CFA Institute program. It tells you about the basics of financial investments in the whole world. It's like a golden standard. It was not about Ukrainian practices, but that's what people were missing out on. And people were trying to find answers to the challenges they have in finance. So finance, it's a pretty cumbersome subject, and sometimes you should not be giving some generic advice to people, especially if they don't know the baseline theory. That's not going to help. So we could see that the best way would be to combine theory and certain cases to be addressed, study case studies and so on. So 5 years ago, we haven't seen so much of that, but right now we can see a growing need for that. There are experts who can do it, who can tell them about that. So that combination would be the best learning for them. And it will help cover more people. It's going to be an online course as before, so people will be able to sign up for that soon. So we're going to just relaunch it once again. Speaking of the audience, well, since it's an online course, anybody could sign up. There was no segregation, and average age was 30 years. Just as you said, we didn't have so many youths, but still, 1/3 of the participants were over 45, up to 50. So those are the people that were actively involved and interested in the course. For the youth, well, you cannot come up with a one-size-fits-all, but we could clearly see that it's going to be the same thing, theory plus practice, but it can be repackaged in a way. So I remember we were doing a course on ethics in financial professional ethics, and it was like a chat with somebody, and it gained a higher success rate, more people got certificates, and the audience was younger. So you can slightly modify the format to match the needs of the audience. You can offer one format for the older people, something else for the younger. But you could tell people about the proposal of investment products. Well, right now, the range of those products offered is not so wide. Okay, let's have it from the legal clinics people. In the project, we have been able to find a network of partners as legal clinics. It was hard to find those among NGOs and CSOs, the ones that could become trailblazers in financial literacy and protection of consumer rights. Not too many NGOs are involved in that. So, Yulia, could you tell us about the results of your legal clinic in terms of financial literacy? And then Christina will tell us more specifically about their legal clinic. Thank you. And I also would like to thank the project on transformation of financial sector. It allowed us to highlight the idea of a legal clinic as a practical tool for training students inside the university. So, while being students, they can consult certain clients, they can establish rapport with them, and they gain soft skills working with big audiences in literacy courses. Legal clinics in this country have been around for a long time, but because of the project we have been able to promote this idea with most of the universities, and it unlocked more capacities of the clinic. We launched a campaign trying to get the students to come to our clinics, and we told this to the clients. We let them know that they are welcome to go to the clinic to get support and advice and whatever they need. In the beginning, it was going hard. Our students are 18 to 22-year-olds, and these are the guys that are the least financially literate, as we can see. So initially we did some training for them, and in doing so, it would be done by the principle, I keep on learning and I teach somebody at the same time. So students would go to high schools, to local NGOs, and would teach local kids, high school kids, and it would allow them to spread financial literacy knowledge. I appreciate the project experts. So initially they trained us as those who run legal clinics. Tatiana Grishenko, Tatiana Brock, thank you, ladies. So they would teach us first. There was a big forum conducted for legal clinics, and then they agreed to take part in the project. So it was 14 clinics from 13 cities of the country taking part in that. They would offer client consultation, they would do literacy campaigns, and then they would organize additional training sessions to increase the literacy of students. Speaking of achievements, well, our students are actively involved in protecting the rights of users of financial services. well, our project is over, we've got the resulting products and the students are still using them. We used the cases that were there when the project was around. We used the manuals which were developed in the field of financial literacy. Our pride is the festival called Street Law. Street Law is a way of teaching people law in accessible language. So we did this online first because there was lockdown at that time. This year we continued this practice, and in Lviv city we conducted the festival offline. It was hosted by the Catholic University, and that was a great thing. In the first festival, students prepared the materials. It was about fraud and lending. This time they were interested in something else, like investments, insurance, family budget planning, so these things are going places. Yula, I heard you had set up financial hubs in some of the clinics. Tell us more about that. Well, these 14 legal clinics were involved in other individual projects that would offer advice and consultation, but there had been 5 clinics from different parts of Ukraine: Lviv, Chernivtsi, Kiev, Kharkov, and Slavyansk. Those were cherry-picked for a comprehensive service to users of financial service. So they would train all of the students and consultants, and they would establish special products of those clinics, and they still keep on using them. So one of these hubs is Christina's clinic. It's got a lot of these cases that we're using now. And based on those, we keep on teaching students up to this day. All right, thank you. Over to Christina. So, tell us about your audiences and what kind of issues people bring to you. You spoke of 60 microloans and what could be a way out of that. It's a legal clinic. It's not a legal aid center in the full sense of the word, but still, within your capacities, you would be able to help people out of trouble, as far as I can see. Yes. I also would like to say that I appreciate the project team and what they have done. Fantastic results. And I'm happy to see that you have contributed to the success in financial literacy. And again, I appreciate the efforts from the project team. Speaking for the legal clinic, well, students of law offer advice under the guidance of their teachers. They work with the users of financial services, and that was quite a challenge, I must admit. When a client came to us having 60 microloans, I was not comfortable. I didn't know what to do, let alone the students who didn't know somebody could end up in that sort of trouble. So that was a challenge. And then we looked into the series of training sessions by Tatiana Grishenko and Tatiana Barak. In those sessions, we could clearly see what are the options. We could see how the market of financial services operates, what are the regulators, how to reach out to them, what are the undertones in particular financial products. So after that, consultants could go ahead and offer legal aid to the consumers of financial services. Later on, based on our experience, we came up with manuals and algorithms. So nowadays, students can use those materials, but initially we had to put it together. Speaking of the results we have seen up there, those are last year's results. After that, we gained support from a Philadelphia foundation in the United States, and now our results are much better because we keep offering these services and promoting financial literacy. Speaking of the audiences we work with, well, my legal clinic offered legal aid to ex-combatants and people in the military. Then as we started working with the users of financial services, still we would have a lot of the military among them. They have certain lending preferences and so on, and they have certain perks. So legally that we did was about telling them what paperwork they need to take to the bank. And after doing that, the clients would get the result they needed, and they would not have to pay a lot of interest or some penalties and so on, because they had special perks because they are with the military. So we just showed them the way of doing that. But then came up the story with those microloans. Before the project, we were in the Kharkov forum, and Yulia told us to go and take care of a client in our legal clinic, and that was the lady which had 60 microloans, and that was a shocking thing. We tell this story to all of the students we ever have, but even in that setting, we have been able to slightly help the client. If you think of a profile of the microloan users or payday loan users, typically these people do not know what debt do they have in a particular institution. So the consultants are supposed to help them find out more about that, like how can they get updates from the credit history bureau, how to run a check on the existing debts, what paperwork do they need to take to a particular financial institution. The situation might look complicated and people are desperate, and they eventually came down to us hoping to take care of these outstanding loans, and then we tell them that we cannot take care of this. Actually, we're not a bank, but we can tell you about the ways of doing something about that. So I would not say we help the client find a complete solution to all of those outstanding loans, but at least we let that lady understand where to go and what to do. She could find out how much does she owe to this or that institution. And there have been some other cases. There have been other cases. It was about notaries' statements. In many cases, something gets arrested based on the executive order from the notary. It's a part of the loan agreement. So we have learned to make the right paperwork in that case, and there have been success stories in this regard. Initially we had lots of questions about where can I find information and so on, and many people just do not know how to find information in the Credit History Bureau. How can they find themselves in the Register of Debtors? There are public registers, and you can get a lot of updates about yourself, because you may have been victimized by fraudsters. You might be seen as taking a loan you never did. So one of our people, Mr. Yurko, took over a number of those cases, a number of clients with those problems, and he has been able to tell the users how to find particular information, where to find it, and what could be done about a particular situation. How to make the right paperwork for restructuring, which bank should they take it to. There is a hotline in the NBU, people never know about that. There is even a chatbot which can offer you advice on something simpler than that, but consultants take on something more complicated. Well, thank you. I guess with this we can turn over to somebody else. So Rostislav, you're gonna do the wrap-up about handling disputes in your platform, but with this, we're gonna have it from the representatives of financial institutions. We spoke a lot about microloans. So we're gonna get more updates. I told the colleagues that We have preliminary findings of the research. We haven't published it yet. It's another round of mystery shopping research. We try to see if consumer lending is done by law, if real APR is calculated in the right way. The results show that if we speak about financial companies, then unfortunately we can see that not all of those practices are legit. So in the contracts there are clauses which are not in line with the law. They do not disclose information to people, although people get more information than they ever did before. So is law enforcement done appropriately by the National Bank vis-a-vis the perpetrators? Well, in the market there are guys who are doing wrong things, but we need to make sure there is an adequate law enforcement, or penalties should be adequate. So there are two things we could discuss. Let's think of awareness. The size of a rate is such and such under the NBU methodology, but it's quite a significant number. So we need to think of clients' awareness. They need to know exactly what they're taking and how much they're going to be paying back. And the second thing is law enforcement. We need to see if it's efficient, adequate, or something should be done better. Thank you. So here is the deal. The National Bank has modified the calculation methodology. In the first round of the research, they did it one way. Now it's done differently. And microloans are so complicated and they're unfit for the banking system. And even financial professionals found it difficult to calculate everything right there. Then the NBU provided elucidations to participants, and many companies would go to the NBU asking them to teach them to calculate it right. Those who did it wrong were penalized. This information can be found in the NBU website, and it gets updated once the committee has convened for a meeting. Secondly, speaking about law enforcement, well, let's keep on talking about awareness. It's important to give a passport, all of the conditions of the contract. Clients need to know what they're going to end up paying. There is a growing number of visits in case companies charged clients extra in the course of loan repayment. So there have been quite many cases in which clients ended up paying more than the paperwork suggested. So it is important to keep this transparency intact between banks and clients. In banks and non-banks, it's pretty much the same thing. It is regulated by the consumer lending law and the NBU regulations. Towards the end of this month, they should approve extra requirements on the contracts for financial aid, and a special focus will be placed on microloans. It will also cover disclosure, advertisement, and all of the information that might be needed by consumers. All of that is controlled by the NBU within the supervision. Market players get the requirements from the NBU, and they see what kind of information should be provided. Certain regulations have just taken effect, and it's going to take a while. NBU is a very efficient regulator. At a particular point in time, you have to do something. A week later, a company gets a request like show this, disclose that, and the company needs to disclose appropriate information. For digital communication channels, you need to be a part of the Bank ID NBU system. Even then, the bank is in control of the disclosure of all contractual information. As an association, are you trying to do awareness raising among the perpetrators, or maybe you try and do self-regulation so that you would not rely on the regulator alone, but as an association. You know, in your plans, there is an SRO. Yeah, let me tell you, and let's bring up a slide on this. Our key goal is cooperation. As I told you, the focus is placed on the financial service provider. But there has been a change of focus. The participants believe that providers of financial services are supposed to be an active part of financial literacy, and they need to offer high-quality services. The association will aid in control and self-control. There are three main principles of legal protection: awareness of the rights and duties, so everybody while making a contract could see that I've got rights and duties. Then unfair legal practices should be ruled out. I appreciate the colleagues from legal clinics for sharing high quality elucidations. But in the market, it often happens that non-bona fide consultants promise to write off 90% of the debt to a client for some extra pay. And then the NBU gets lots of requests which cannot be addressed or handled. And we believe accessibility should be there too, like there should be multiple sources of getting updates on financial services. We disclose not only the information that we're supposed to, but also the information that is needed to offer financial services to make a client make the right choice. So to us, the participants in the process are providers of service, regulators, associations, and international donors. And thanks once again to the USAID project.
Стратегічні напрямки роботи, асоціація. Наразі ми
Two main strategic lines. We're drafting consultation standards right now. We believe that as you check with a financial company, most of the issues can be resolved. And we're gonna coordinate and keep control over the quality of this information. It is important to do joint PR projects with the market players. There has been a series of that done with the NBU in the Новое Время portal. That's where we're gonna release information on financial literacy. This week it's gonna address the protection of rights of consumers in the digital world. Okay, we have to move on. The same question for the banks now. The banks do not look so good in our research in terms of abiding by the law on consumer lending. It's just that the interest rate is lower, but all in all we can see wrong things done in terms of keeping customers aware and things that should be indicated in the advertisement: interest rate, loan passport, the calculation of the real APR. Those who do microloans might find it pretty new, but banks know what it's all about. So how come you get so many mistakes? Maybe lack of proficiency of consultants. Sorry for the questions like that, but they matter. And unfortunately, it hasn't been a very positive evolution in this regard lately. Thank you, Yulia, for this question. Well, what you can see are more or less relevant numbers reflecting overall trends. It's not like a financial company is less experienced than that, banks are more experienced. Well, we can see quick changes in regulations, in the legislation. So many banks are experiencing transformations, and naturally it's a result of the development of the financial market. So if rates are low, then the risks for clients of banks, if those mistakes happen, are not so big. They might be actually minimum. But banks are nevertheless working on that. If you think of something else, like is legal regulation enough to protect the rights of consumers right now? I would say it's more than enough right now. Maybe it's even slightly over-regulated. There is a law on protecting consumers' rights that dates back to 2016, and it features transformation changes since 2021. So now these requirements also cover microloans. Unfortunately, not all the financial market players have been aware of that, and sometimes their agreements do not match the new practices, and your research actually indicates that. But towards the end of the year and in early next year, I think we're going to see fewer inconsistencies like that. Starting July, there has been a law in effect, anti-collector law as they call it. It's about regulating outstanding debts. And this takes me to a question about the adequacy and commensurability of efforts from the NBU. Well, earlier this week, or actually in the end of last week, we have seen the first case where the NBU applied a penalty, 102,000 hryvnia vis-a-vis a company, a collector's agency, but it's not found on the registry of collector's agencies. And there was a quick response. 3 months later, I mean, it took less than a month since the consumer took the complaint to the NBU, and then there was a quick response. What about the banks? Can they be sanctioned for breaching the rights of customers, like some illegit conditions in contracts or whatever? Certainly, I don't know much about that. I don't know the stats for that, but banks double check that, and we have to abide by that. If it's a question about the size of a penalty, then the size is adequate, and all people in the know understand that it's not all about the severity of penalties, it's about the law enforcement that is adequately applied. So if National Bank is consistent in its inspections, it's one thing. If they do not penalize the wrongdoers but only recommend improvements, then there's going to be trouble not only in the banking sector. And actually, I appreciate Alla mentioning the fact that right now the market is a polar product of a kind. Like, you get too little competent legal aid. All clients think that I'm not going to repay the loan, and many consultants offer the services pretty much the same way. Like, they will find a way which will help them avoid repaying the loan. It will get written off and so on. So in the subway you can see lots of ads suggesting that consultants could help you out. But we work with the problem banks, and we always say that you can come and get a deal. It's going to be faster, it's going to be better, and emotionally it's going to be a lot better too. So if legal clinics keep doing what they're doing, offering expert aid and service consistently enough, then the overall culture of responsible consumption will be getting better among users of financial services in this country. Thank you for this interesting point. And now, Rostislav, could you now tell me, how do you do your job? Like, you work with consumers and financial institutions on an electronic platform established in your association, which is a fintech solution, and it's an electronic format. Isn't that an obstacle in terms of access for many people to this system.
I would like to thank Mr. Bond once again for having trust in this idea. This is a non-standard case. We had to realize what criteria could be implemented. This case, nonetheless, has become a success. And this approach is human-centric. We try to consider the aspects that you revealed during the research. What we realized, some people are characterized by financial illiteracy, but many of them are also legally illiterate, and they had issues when communicating with the bank, and in fact they did not realize whether they have an issue and their rights are violated. So there are two categories of consumers: those who are willing to repay the loans and those who are reluctant. And we try to act as mediators between these people and banks, because we had to explain that the loan should be repaid. So this is the first thing related to inclusion. What happened actually? COVID-19 started, it's become a great challenge, and this platform has become the only opportunity to protect one's rights, because the lawyers did not receive people. People could not get to institutions, couldn't use public vehicles, and so. But through this digital platform, they had an opportunity to raise their concerns. And we also enjoyed support from the Association of People with Disabilities. There are 2 million of people with disabilities, and unfortunately they are excluded. They are unable to protect their rights. And for them, a very simple interface was produced. It was a very tough assignment to make this interface as simple as possible. And the consumer can also check the application. We were supported by the leading associations in this market, such as Association of Financial Institutions. It supported this initiative in the field of consumer rights protection. What happened next? What we realized? Please show us the next slide. You have to realize what the statistics of complaints looks like. 90% of complaints are submitted against the micro financial organizations. The debts are not calculated in the proper way, and there are also complaints about collectors' agencies. So we faced the following situation. We hired a lawyer, a young girl, to support the platform, and in the end of the day, she burst in tears after reading these complaints. Psychologically, it was really difficult, especially for people who are not trained as lawyers. We involved 2 legal companies that could proceed with these complaints. They supported us at the pilot stage pro bono until we hired our own lawyers. 45% of complaints were processed. And another unique feature would be, let's scroll back, would be the first digital mediation process. There is legal discussion around this mediation process. However, on the platform, mediation does function. About 30 financial institutions have supported this platform. They are ready to solve the issues with consumers through this digital mediation. The culture is not developed yet. The training is a time-consuming process. However, such an opportunity does exist. And another feature would be financial complaints initiatives. So what else? Maybe it's really interesting, and we didn't expect this as we launched the platform. We got enough stats, we got enough cases in order to engage the public. We engaged the ambassadors to promote the platform, and this pressure was sufficient to support this anti-collection law. So we involved some ambassadors to promote the platform. The anti-collection law was adopted. It is in operation. We do not disclose this information to the market because we are in the training stage. Still, we are the companies that receive the means of influence according to the law is one of the anti-leaders, so to say. And what are the prospects of future development? We have exceeded the expectations and the KPIs established at the initial stage. However, we still have only two products, cash credits and credit cards. We are trying to launch other products in order to involve all types of financial institutions to regulate this situation as a result of the financial providers law. And finally, could you please tell us for our spectators, a person has financial problems, has problems with loan. What algorithm can be recommended? How this person can seek help through your platform? Oh, actually, before you take the loan, you should be aware of your capacity to repay it. And secondly, as long as you are in debt, you have to be really aware of the legislation. You have to read the laws. If you feel that your rights are being violated, this can be you can get some calls, especially if you have no loans. You can get some calls from the third parties, or your dignity is insulted. You can access the platform, financial complaint. You can get registered and describe your case from your own point of view. You do not have to be a lawyer or a financial professional in order to submit an application. The platform will try to classify the application, will try to assess the completeness of this application, and then the specialists of the platform will communicate with the customer. If the complaint or application is complete, it will be then forwarded to the financial institution for the institution to respond. And there is also an opportunity for the platform to develop the application or complaint to the National Bank of Ukraine. There are such cases. So this is one of the options. So NBU can be also joining the platform, and the platform can be used as the third-party opinion to regulate these disputes. As long as the problem is not resolved, the person can also seek the solution through litigation. Thank you, dear participants. Thank you for this discussion. And Denise is asking for the floor as well. I've got a small observation. This algorithm should also include the following recommendation. The borrowers should not wait for accumulation of debts. As soon as they realize that they are not able to repay the regular portion of the debt, they should contact the financial institution and ask for restructuring or some financial sanation. Because when the DPD is 90 plus, such customer is not perceived as a reliable one. In such case, the relations between the consumer and financial institution may become healthier. So the customer should not wait till the problem aggravates. Yeah, thank you very much. So we've expanded our knowledge in the field of law enforcement and legislation. So all these aspects are, so to say, indicators of our financial sector's development. We wish all of you lots of success on this track. Thank you.